Um, and I'm a member of the ABSI Ethics Committee.
Excellent, excellent. Jojo, Robina?
Sorry, so for one, Facebook is acting a fool. I think it tried to go live on my personal page and then it's just not even live at all. So we're just gonna record in the interest of time. But I'm Jojo Hickson. I'm a clinical PsyD doctoral candidate and the Student Circle Communications Chair and the Public Relations Chair. And I think that's what we're doing.
Yep, thanks, Jojo, for all the troubleshooting you're doing. I'm Robina. I am a counseling psychology PhD candidate, and I'm the past communications chair, and I serve on the social media virtual impact team now.
I think I said my name. I said nothing else about myself. But
yes, but you're a person who needs no introduction. So
all right. Just Lord. No, actually, I'm a past president of the Association of Black Psychologists, as well as elder of elders emerita. I'm also emerita from the Ohio State University, clinical psychologist by training, and so happy we're here to have this conversation today. Kujichagulia, we have been so immersed in self-determination here. But our subtext is challenging revisionist history and performative activism. And actually this endeavor is dedicated to both of those, challenging revisionist history and engaging in performative activism. So that having been said, I just wonder if our panelists have anything to share in terms of their own thinking about self-determination and why it's so necessary at this time.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
Because I'm very familiar with revisionist history, but what exactly, help me with, I'm not sure I know what we're referencing when we talk about performative activism.
You want to take that, Jojo?
Yeah, so, oh my gosh. So we're live on my personal page. I'm trying to share it to the association's page because nobody ever engages me, like they just be dubbing me. But anyway, it'll be there for later. So by performative activism, we mean that, after George Floyd's murder, we saw like an increase in racial consciousness and everybody wanted to be active and like everybody wanted to be an activist. But it was like really that seemed like just a popular thing to do. So you saw like in DC, they painted Black Lives Matter across, the ground. And they also did that in my hometown, Jersey City. But it's like a week after they did that, for instance, in DC, they were the cops were beating civilians on the same like Black Lives Matter mural. So it's like people are just doing things just to do them because it's a popular thing to do and just to appear anti-racist, but they're not actually actualizing that in praxis, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Performative as in a performance as opposed to substantive. Your thoughts, Robina?
So you I feel like you asked two questions. You asked how we feel about the performative activism and then how we feel about Kujichagulia. Okay, I think just in terms of the performative activism, obviously it doesn't lend to many solutions. I feel like it's usually used as a distraction from what the actual issue is or what the actual actions that should be taken are. Like, I remember one of the things last year, or maybe a few years ago now, that went viral was them posing like with a fist up and wearing the kente cloth things, which I thought was pretty just like disrespectful. But part of those type of things, it's like they put awareness on like, oh, we're thinking about the issue, we're talking about it, but it's almost the same thing that that's done in academia. We're gonna make a committee to talk about the issue, but it's just buying time from actually resolving what the root of the issue is or solving the problem. So I think that's where Kujichagulia comes into place, because if we are keeping the main issue, it's kind of has been left up to us as Black people to be reminding folks that the resolution has not been made yet. Like, this is still an issue. We still need to like push forward and create change, whereas everybody else is maybe trying to distract us, or some people are even falling, in the trap of getting distracted.
So I'm sure, Dr. Harvey, your question about self-determination has been answered. And thank you for sharing around Kujichagulia. I can't even talk. My tongue is having technical difficulties. But I do know that we have Kwanzaa season coming up, and probably, in my mind, one of the most critical of those principles is self-determination, because the most important thing in my thinking as a psychologist that we have to self-determine is what we're assuming is true about the world and the way things work. If we've been indoctrinated into our ancestors' captors' perspective, we'll probably not end up being very self-determined. But rather than me going to a lecture on that subject, why don't we turn to our other panelists and see what they have to say? I know, Dr. Harvey, you are president of the board of the Cultural Wellness Center in Minneapolis. Yes. Doing amazing work, amazingly self-determined work. Maybe you could share some of that with us.
Well, you know, the thing about the Cultural Wellness Center is that the Cultural Wellness Center set itself up to be an African-centered organization 25 years ago, and has lived by the principles of, you know, we are African people, and our primary focus has been to deal with one problem, and that one problem is individualism and loss of culture. And that's what we address. And so what we tried to do over the years is not get drawn into the agendas of funding organizations, or even not get drawn into the agendas of well, let's say revisionist history, or this kind of responding to current events, you know, from event to event, and always being in a reactive mode. We set our sights on what we want to change and how we want to change it, and working with the community to change that. And so we try not to get sidetracked by every new event that comes along. What has happened in the last year? Well, because of that, a lot of people just kind of ignored us for years. You know, we're out there in the hinterlands doing our stuff. We weren't seeking foundation grant funding. We weren't seeking government funding. We were doing contracts to deliver a service. But what's happened in the last year and a half, 2 years now, is that because we have been so focused on trying to do this kind of community change for many, many years, the events of society have kind of caught up with us and discovered us. And so the world is turning to us and saying, oh, you guys have been here. You guys have been doing this for all these years. It's like, help us know how to do this. And so the Minnesota Department of Health has turned to us, and a couple of the large community HMOs have turned to us. We've had a long-term relationship with Alina. Alina's a healthcare organization. But what has happened is that we realize that, you know, if you focus on being self-determined and pursuing your own agenda, that eventually the world will, you know, will turn to us and, you know, come to us and say, look, we've been floundering around in the hinterlands looking for solutions, like, help us with solutions.
And, you know, I think that's a good segue into what's happening with psychology as a discipline. As we last session talked about the American Psychological Association's apology. I don't know if they've acknowledged fully they've been floundering around, but they kind of did. And certainly the Association of Black Psychologists has from its inception been very dedicated and devoted to challenging revisionist history and really making every effort possible to present the true history, and also present it from our own Africological perspective, meaning asking the right questions and answering the questions from our own cultural frame. So that, I think, is probably what happens to most organizations who have historically pursued issues and questions of self-determination. And we are so glad they have, because if there was ever a time in human history where we need some thinking that is grounded in what you at the Cultural Wellness Center call Kepleran philosophy, for those who may be less familiar, that would be from the Nubia Comedian cultural frame, where Kepler is the beetle that pushes its dung where the eggs are, and with the flooding of the Nile comes forth rejuvenated and revived, and life goes on. So it's actually a fantastic model for Kujichagulia. Jojo, your thoughts?
I feel like the APA is like this huge monstrosity of an organization. And we're talking right now, Baba Rowe, Baba Nobles, and Baba Goddard, and then some of the other elders, of course, Nalanda, are talking about the monopoly of the APA. And I think that makes it really hard to be like a student and just another, a regular professional member trying to push back against that narrative, against that, white supremacist hegemony, because it literally impacts every aspect of our professional career, the APA. So like, we can't even file complaints without the APA doing internal investigations on themselves, which is kind of like the police investigating themselves. So I think that hoarding of power has a lot to do with why they did want to appear more anti-racist and make that apology, because they're still kind of perpetuating the same things that they're apologizing for. They think that maybe if they call it out and it looks differently now, people won't catch on. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely did. I just was interested in your thoughts, and you gave us your thoughts. So excellent. Jojo? I'm sorry, Robina?
I don't think I have too much different to say from how kind of we went into discussing it last week, from a point of view of a student being part of that system. Obviously, getting a doctoral degree in a program that is accredited by, the APA is something that I have to, or I've been dealing with in classes and stuff based on the curriculum that I'm consuming. And then us having to do, as Black students, having to do additional work to be able to learn what we really need to know as Black psychologists in order to serve our population in the most safe and sustainable way. That's kind of been, just something that I've been navigating, and ABSI has been really helpful with that. And I'm like my sibling scholars too, being able to lean on them in different times. But yeah, my biggest thing is just as a student, how much of a mental strain it is to have to balance both, not having much power while being part of going through the process and being in the system, and then everything that we have to do, to come out on the other side and then finally, practice in a way that might be best suited for us.
The interesting thing is that I think that self-determination comes from self-concept, and our concept of self needs to be tempered by reality. And one of the things I recall is that I was doing a presentation 20 years ago or so, and ABSI was coming up on its 30th anniversary. And I realized that, and looking back in history, that we see APA as this giant behemoth of, that controls all of psychology. But when APA was the age that ABSI was at its 30th anniversary, APA was the same size as ABSI was after 30 years of organizational history. And to think about that, to think about not only where we were at the same growth level as APA was when it was at our stage in its history, and then look at the fact that the potential for ABSI's growth is huge in terms of APA thinks of itself as being the controller of all of psychology, but there are many more people of color than there are Caucasians on this planet. And in terms of our potential for growth, it's far beyond the capacity of what APA's potential for growth is, unless we allow APA to continue its hegemony and try to bring all of psychology under its wing.
Well, that certainly has not happened, as we, for the last 55 years, as the Association of Black Psychologists, have so many scholars dedicated to developing their own theories and thinking and ideas around human development that really overshadow the mainstream notions that have gotten us to the place we are in society and world and global culture today. As a society, we are I'm talking now about mainstream society, we are so challenged around issues of mental health, around issues of truth, around issues of values, and all the things that really have been hidden under a political rubric that keeps people confused and keeps people from thinking in terms of how to think for themselves, how to question, how to think critically and deeply. And as a consequence, I read an article maybe a few days ago by 3 generals, United States generals, who are predicting a possible civil war in this country in the next few years. I mean, when you think about it, if our psychological adeptness and our capacity to really yield and create healing and health among individuals were that good, would we be seeing the threat of a civil war in this country in the next few years? I think not. Mm-hmm. And so that lets us know self-determination is needed now more than ever. Because if you're not thinking for yourself, if you're not thinking critically and deeply about what's going on, if you're not even focusing on the fact that there is a number of industries committed to brainwashing you or indoctrinating you into certain beliefs and assumptions, then self-determination will be impossible, and our health and well-being will be impossible to achieve. Other thoughts?
I was going to say that, excuse me, when Dr. Linder brought up, our, I guess the age of our association in comparison to the APA, I remember I used to do that often, and the elders used to call me in like, we're not the APA, and we don't have the same, they don't have the same trials and tribulations as us, because we're Black and they hoarded power and they were racist, or are racist. So I'm wondering, like, how much bigger we can go if we didn't have, or we could go if we didn't have like those barriers in place.
We realize something that they don't realize, and that they come from a cultural paradigm that is focused on dividing everybody up into their various groups. And they have used that to promote the power of their, Western European group. But the reality is that is not power. The power is recognizing that all the people in the world are people of African descent. All the people in the world are people of African descent. And that's the umbrella that we need to gather people under.
Absolutely. Humanity.
And they're not going to do that. We can do that if we're willing to do that.
And I think we do that.
We have to learn to embrace that concept and extend it to the world. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I think many of us do. stay committed to one race, the human race, and have devoted a lot of time and attention research to explore what it does mean to be human. And unfortunately, in this social context, that's something also that hasn't been readily discerned or determined. So we see a lot of inhumane behavior. We see a lot of contradictions and a lot of, what should we say politely, lies being told that people say with a perfectly straight face and perpetuate it and fuse into the educational system. And we as receptors of that miseducation and missocialization sometimes become so confused and brainwashed and indoctrinated. We don't even question. We don't even realize the critical value of self-determination. So I always love this season where we can begin to look at those principles of Kwanzaa and begin to interrogate what they really mean for our daily lives and daily functioning.
Self-determination begins with a concept of self. And if your concept of self is an all-encompassing concept, understanding that we are not individual selves, we are not ethnic or tribal selves, that, each one of us as an individual is also a facet of something that's much larger than any individual, and that we're all part of that one thing. There was there used to be a cartoon series called Pogo. I won't get into trying to describe what kind of animal Pogo was, but Pogo, there's a Pogo cartoon once that was a play on a famous quotation that was done by, I think it was Commodore Perry during the War of 1812. And they had this big battle, I think it was on Lake Erie, naval battle on Lake Erie. And Commodore Perry, although his ships were smaller and outnumbered, were able to defeat the British ships. And what Commodore Perry, the famous quotation is, "We have met the enemy and they are ours." Meaning, we found them, we've engaged them, and we've defeated them. And the Pogo cartoon was, "We have met the enemy and they are us." And that's very true. It's like the enemy we see as the enemy is us. Linda talks about the possibility of civil war. The thing that happens in a civil war is people are fighting themselves. They're fighting their own people. Is that the future we want to envision for ourselves? Is that we continue to fight with ourselves? We continue to fight with our own people. Why are we doing that? Why, if we defeat ourselves, then what are we gaining?
I think the key question is, who is our? In actuality, this society's always been very divided, but the puppet masters, I call them, that are orchestrating much of what's been created by design want us pitted against one another.
And we have to not fall into that. We have to not
self-determination, yes. And I think the whole notion of that self, who is the self? What is the self that is determining? And what we want to do is elevate our consciousness so it's the higher self that's determining, not the lower self. And the socialization in this society and dominant culture in the West in general is that lower, greedy, materialist, patriarchal, sexist, racist self that is so needy and wanting to be in control and have power over others. But I think really what we are learning from other cultural frames of reference is that's unfortunate, because we need a psychological analysis and understanding that allows us to elevate the consciousness of the human being so that they're not coming from a place of alienation from their spiritual essence. They're not coming from a place of fragmentation and insecurity and fear and of all those negative energies that keep that lower self going. And I think that the Association of Black Psychologists, with its Afrocentric bent, has been very instrumental in bringing that other cultural reality forward so that people get the sense, as all African people have from the beginning of history, that it is that spiritual essence, that spirit force that is within us all and within which we're all in. And therefore we are interconnected and we are interdependent. And when people fall from that level of consciousness to the lower consciousness, that's where they get into the individualism and the competition and the materialism. So it's been said we are at war, but in actuality, we're at it's a spiritual war. It's a war of thoughts. It's a war of consciousness. It's a war of feeling.
I was going to say, I definitely agree that like we're all interconnected, but I think that we will be fools to, if one part of the body is in alignment and in accord to, you know, living out that higher consciousness, but the other part of the body is trying to harm the rest of the body. I don't think that we should ignore that. And so I think that, you know, I guess it's just, you know, it's not, the onus is not on us to make sure that all parts of the body are in alignment, AKA the whites. And I feel like we are doing what we have to do, you know, to be self-determined and to make sure that our people know to critically analyze anything that's happening to them and their experiences and such like that. And also, shameless plug, we are looking for members who have certain areas of expertise, such as in agriculture and farming and law and AI, to provide a short paragraph on how they might recommend us to inform policy and legislation. But yeah, I think that, I don't know, I guess I'm just radical in my thinking. I'm just fed up. I haven't been here long, but I'm fed up with trying to be on the same accord as everybody else. I feel like, you know, I can't just turn my back on people who have been trying to harm me. So I'm going to focus on the part of the body that is not trying to harm me and that is aware of their higher consciousness and their diurnal thinking and things like that.
Well, it's akin to
I think
how
you make a very
the
important point, Jojo, but I think what I was suggesting is the lower self, the self that's been dominating, is illusion. They're caught up in illusion and we get caught up in the illusion. And I really like your point, which is at some point we need to direct our attention away from them and onto us so we continue to move forward and go forward. And in reality, you can't make anyone think or do anything they don't choose to. And I am certainly in the struggle long enough to have given up on trying to make someone be who they have never been, who they don't want to be, and go forward and trying to elevate those people who want to be liberated and soul illuminated.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, Jojo, and also you, Linda. I'm thinking that it's akin to how we address the issue of like ethnic and cultural differences. It's like we're not trying to tell people to ignore the difference. We're not trying to tell people to be colorblind, don't see the difference. And so I would say likewise that we're not saying ignore what's happening. We're saying that we have to find ways to transcend what's happening and see beyond what's happening and be able to still see that that we are still all one thing, even though we do have differences. We can recognize those differences and yet be able to transcend those differences.
Robina, your thoughts? You've been quiet.
Yeah, I've just kind of been taking it in because I think that where I kind of fall is more when I think about like my racial identity development, I guess I would say, I'm at the point where I am much more strongly on the self-determination because it's been shown, and Georgia, you said like, oh, I haven't been here long. And I feel the same way too, but we've talked about how a lot of our like ancestral, blood and their experiences are also in our body. So we carry a lot of that. And I think that for certain people, there is like a level to where they can't, take as much because we're feeling it. We're like very connected to it. So I don't really care too much of what white people are thinking or doing about certain things, especially because I know that they have proven to not have our best interest at heart. So I think the best way that we can move forward is leading by example. And then if there are folks who are quote unquote allies or, whatever the correct term to use now is, then they can, fall in line and be able to ask what needs to be done or be able to follow our lead in helping the movement to move along. But I think a lot of times from what we've seen, they're not necessarily interested in doing it for our best interest. And I don't think that everybody believes that, once we're all free, or I think it's Asada who said like, once like the Black woman is free, then everybody else will be free, because those are the people that are most marginalized or have been minoritized in society. But I don't think that people really grasp that concept of what that means, because we still have this like selfish mindset. And part of it is we've been programmed to think that way because white folks have been the one to really control a lot of the media. Even to this day, like, I don't think they really want us to think for ourselves. Like a lot of what's put out there in music and television, like all those things really just glorify a lot of stuff that takes away our critical thinking. And so we have fallen prey to a lot of their tactics. And I think that us being aware of that and leaning into each other will be the way that we can kind of get out of it. Yeah.
No doubt. I so very much agree. In fact, it's the only way. And I think the challenge is as we've over time heard our scholars and cultural thinkers say, Du Bois comes to mind, double consciousness. We have to overcome that double consciousness. We are past the time where we can have two warring minds in one body. Well, I should say it this way. If we haven't become aware, we may indeed have two warring minds in one body. We do need to move that step forward. But at some point, we need to resolve that dichotomy and understand that that Black mind, the African mind, the mind that was in the beginning and is now and ever shall be, is the one we want to go forward with. And when we do that, we may not even be choosing to be self-determined. We simply will by virtue of how we've constructed reality and our values and have chosen to move. So from where I'm sitting, it looks good in terms of our future. And it's going to look better as more and more of us come to the realization of who and what we are and tap into that transcendent power that's got us here. Who would have thought 250 years of no rights as a human being could allow you to come forth with a modicum of sanity, much less end up leading a nation toward justice and equity for all people. So if we keep going in the same direction and keep doing even, as Baba Wade says, mo better, we can definitely ensure ourselves that we will triumph.
Well, I know Jojo was observing that there are some comments, and I think in the chat, but I did want to say that, one of the challenges in achieving that higher consciousness is to understand that part of the way that we develop our concept of self is we learn to differentiate the self from other. And so that's an important step. But a step beyond that is understanding that, and this is a challenge. This is a challenge, for all of us. But one of the step beyond that in developing the higher consciousness is recognizing that there is no other, that all we see is self. There are other aspects of self that are out there. And we can be of two minds, but that's all one mind. It's one side of the same ultimate mind. And that's what we have to integrate in order to become the higher self.
I think there is a cultural frame where that whole individuation process you just mentioned, Dr. Harvey, doesn't occur. We know in African cultural tradition, the notion that I am, therefore we are, Sawubona, Ubuntu all says that it is because we are that I am. And so individuation as we know it in the West doesn't really flow in terms of the developmental process the way it does in the West. And so
we say that as a cultural framework, but the reality is that all of us have been indoctrinated into the Western mindset.
That's not true. All of us haven't been indoctrinated.
Most of us have been indoctrinated into a Western mindset.
There you go.
And often we're thinking in a Western frame, even though we have African-centered intentions.
And, you know, I argue for an African-centered conceptual system, and that kind of helps us out. But I think that if we've all been indoctrinated, because but the indoctrination hasn't worked on all of us. Let's just say it that way. But the attempt is made 24/7, 365, and multiply that by the number of years you are. So that's definitely true. Well, we certainly had a very interesting, or having a very interesting discussion this afternoon. I think that the audience is not commenting. Are they, JoJo, or do we have comments from the audience?
We have a few. Somebody shouted you out, Nana Linda, one of my friends who's a pastor from New Jersey. So, you know, we love you over here. Somebody said, this is good. I'm so happy that they could join us because Lord knows we have so many technical difficulties trying to get this thing up. And then somebody said, yes, emotional intelligence and something is really important right now. So just a few comments, but I'm hoping that people will engage with us when we repost the recording.
Yes, and we're sorry about our technical challenges, but we're definitely committed. And thank you so much for the shout out. If we think about the idea of activism and the idea of consciously and deliberately committing to a process of psychological liberation and breaking out of the conceptual incarceration and illuminating our souls, I think we'll be on an excellent path. And one of the things that I want to throw in today is the idea that we really need to look after those who came before us and make sure their history is rectified. And so coming to mind now is our beloved Marcus Garvey. And there's a movement toward his exoneration. So you'll be, if you haven't gotten the emails already, you'll be asked to sign a letter demanding exoneration of his record, because we know he is not to us who he is to them. And we have to stand for who he has been to us as Black people, committed to Pan-Africanism and liberation.
Asha, and I'm sorry, if we're doing shameless plugs, I'm doing a dissertation. I'm doing my dissertation on Black identity development, Black activist identity development. Please, whoever's watching this, we got like two viewers right now. If you know anybody who's a young adult Black American activist between the ages of 18 and 30, please connect with me so I can hear your story and so it can be told appropriately through your voice. Thank you.
You know, there's so much research.
Thank you for doing that.
Yes. So much research and work that needs to be done. And one of the things that I hope that we're able to do as we go forward in the coming year with Creating Zola Mondays is create this as a space where we can let people respond to brief surveys and questionnaires so we can really get some sense of where people are, what their needs are, what they see going forward, because the reality is we are going to be in this society. Probably most of us aren't going anywhere, but we have to band together, and we have to know that we're supporting one another on this path to freedom. And just as Harriet Tubman tried to free the physically enslaved, we at the Association of Black Psychologists are dedicated to freeing our people from mental bondage and conceptual incarceration. So, so appreciate your touching in with us for Creating Zola Mondays, and feel free to go online and actually, even if you don't see the live show, comment in terms of what you'd like to see happen and how you'd like it to see happen. If there are guests you'd like for us to invite, please let us know that. We're happy. In fact, the guests we thought we were having today, we don't have, but the reality is that there's so much that we have to talk about, and particularly going forward, I'm very aware that this is the heightened season for materialism. We call it Christmas, but the reality is a lot of people have basically done what they do with a lot of really strong and powerful ideas is they commodify it. And then people begin to think the holiday is about how many things they get and how much they can accrue materially. But I hope we use this holiday season to go beyond that and use this holiday season to get in touch. In fact, we're going now into the winter solstice, the perfect time to go within and get in touch with that divine spirit within you and relish in that energy that is nurturing and supporting and loving and will never let you go. And then out of that, then we can share it with other people. Go to your family or social gatherings filled with that love, that Zola that ignites the Ngola so we can heal and get past of so many conflicts that we have in our relationships in our communities. So hopefully this holiday season will be the time for that. Hopefully the winter solstice will be that time for going within and coming out. A lot of things are happening in the cosmos that are aligning up to make this fruitful and productive period. So let's take advantage of it in whatever ways we can.
Ashe.
Ashe.
The idea of relationships is so critical to our future as a people. And right now, in Columbus, Ohio, where I am, young people are killing each other, and adults, young Black people are it's just like a lot happening because people can't tolerate that fragmented suboptimal view that has taught them to have an externalized sense of worth, where they are seeking peace and security and well-being and finding none because the system is designed to disenfranchise them from having opportunity and value. Mm-hmm. The whole institutional system is designed to do what it's doing. And we can't forget that. We have to understand that for some people, the system's working exactly the way they intended it to. And that's where we again have to turn back to self-determination, because it's not working the way we need it to work. Right. So this is a good time for us to begin to think about coming into new year with a new commitment. And I think this notion of self-love is the basis of all love. And to the extent I love myself, I will love you. But the idea of loving myself to the exclusion and detriment of the other simply says you may not love yourself the way you think you do. Because if you did, that piece would not be there for you. So the communication, the interactions that we have with one another, we want them to be the best that they can be. And then we want to own our own responsibility, because in any relationship, nothing is just a function of one person. That's why we call it a relationship. So much we could talk about. We have about 2 minutes, I think, left. Oh, we probably have more now because we started late. So anything anybody would like to interject before we close out today, and leave this for people to look at as they move into the holiday season and ultimately the new year. We won't be back before the new year either.
I think that your comments are a good place to leave it.
Yep. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the live. Thanks, family. Join us at the Kwanzaa celebration. Anything else, Anna?
No, just go out there and love, 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 love. It's the most powerful force in the universe.
Zola.
Zola.